Take a look at this image from the bottom of the ocean, 3 miles deep, about 1,000 miles west of Morocco, as found in Google Earth. It looks like the buried ruins of an ancient city, a huge city, nearly 1/4 the size of Portugal. Soon after this image was discovered, during the first decade of this century, there was a blitz of discussion about it that spread across the internet. Many people said that they had finally discovered evidence of the lost civilization of Atlantis. Well, it did not take long before some scientists weighed in on the discussions, and they dismissed this image as simply a result of what they called ship tracks. Well, these underwater images in Google Earth come from sonar or echo sounding that is performed by ships that are under contract, usually by the United States Navy. Thus, these data are gathered and eventually released by the United States government. Now remember that these are governmental data, a fact that will be important as I explain further. The ships that collect these data are required to move in straight lines as they picture what is on the bottom of the ocean. The data are clearest directly under where the ships travel. Off to the sides of a ship's path, the data are fuzzier. Thus, if a ship does not cover all of the territory in overlapping back and forth trips, the data reveal what is called a ship track. Again, remember that ship tracks are two exactly parallel lines with high-resolution imagery between the two lines and fuzzy imagery outside of the two lines. Here's an example of ship tracks that appear in Google Earth. Note that the resolution of the ocean bottom is high in between the two parallel edges and fuzzy outside of these straight edges. The ship that took this sonar reading followed a path that is exactly above this very straight ship track. Drunken captains who produce wavy ship tracks are not allowed. Ship tracks are straight. Here's another example of ship tracks. Again, note the high-resolution quality of the image in between the parallel lines and the fuzzy quality outside of those lines. Let's look again at the so-called Atlantis image at the bottom of the ocean. Do these look like ship tracks to you? They don't to me. They are not straight, and they are clearly not high-resolution images in between two parallel lines with fuzzy stuff outside of these lines. It does not take a genius to see the obvious. In my view, these are clearly not ship tracks. The question is, what are they? If you stick with me, we will explore what these things on the bottom of the ocean really represent. I am Courtney Brown, and I am a scholar in the field of remote viewing as it is performed using methods that were developed by the United States military and used for espionage purposes, or methods that are derivative of those procedures. Remote viewing is a mental process that allows highly trained individuals to accurately perceive what is called targets, which are places, events, and people across time and space. People who use these procedures are called remote viewers, and when they are really good, they can describe such things in great detail without being told anything in advance about what they are assigned to perceive, a condition known as working blind. Well, there are only a few highly trained remote viewers in the world today, a situation that needs to be addressed seriously in the near future. But a few highly skilled remote viewers do exist now, and they are capable of supplying perceptual data that are what some call scary good. I won't have time today to go into much background regarding the science of remote viewing, but if you want more of that, I suggest that you go to the website for the Farsight Institute, where you can find a huge amount of material, including published, peer-reviewed scientific research. Well, as you can see, I did not believe the ship track explanation as the cause of the underwater anomaly west of Morocco. The data are, as I mentioned earlier, governmental data, and I have long learned to form my own opinion with respect to lots of things released by governments, which often seem to have their own agendas, and which may not want people to know certain things for various reasons. In short, I don't rely on authorities to do my thinking for me. Throughout this presentation, I am hoping you will do the same. This so-called ATLANTIS anomaly is perfect for this sort of puzzle solving. Here we have a clear Google Earth image with an anomaly on the bottom of the ocean, a seemingly authoritative story explaining the anomaly in a way that I personally do not find credible, and the ability to use remote viewing to sort out what is what. So in late 2011, I initiated a remote viewing project using two of the best military-grade remote viewers on the planet, Dick Allgaier and Deborah Duggan-Takagi. Both of these viewers were trained by Glenn Wheaton, who leads the Hawaii Remote Viewers Guild, or HRVG, who came out of Special Forces Intelligence, and both of the viewers have intensively studied the HRVG methods of remote viewing for well over a decade. Both viewers also have an extensive public track record for using remote viewing to accurately describe places, events, and people in publicly verified and well-documented projects dating back many years at the Farsight Institute, the leading civilian scientific institute that supports research into the remote viewing phenomenon using these types of structured data collection methodologies. This entire project took almost a year to complete. There were lots of remote viewing sessions, lots of targets for the remote viewers to examine, and there were also a large number of things that needed to be accomplished prior to initiating the remote viewing component of the project. Throughout the data collection period of the project, the viewers were kept totally blind to the nature of the project or any of the specific targets. They had no idea of what they were being assigned to remote view. They were only told there was a target, and they were told via a non-leading email to remote view it. They also did their work solo, which means that they were alone when remote viewing, and thus there was no one present who could have influenced their results. After typically more than an hour of work for each session, the viewers each supplied between 10 and 20 pages of detailed data, including sketches, describing each target. There were also some sessions that were recorded live on video. Well, as it turned out, just 2 months prior to us completing the data collection phase of our project in early 2012, Google Earth announced a new version of its underwater imagery. And yes, as you can imagine, most but not all of the so-called ATLANTIS anomaly was erased from the new imagery. Keep in mind that all Google Earth data are governmental in origin. Well, some scientists happily announced that this new version of Google Earth fixed problems with the old data, and thus most of the anomaly went away. Gone were the stories about ship tracks, almost as if they had not happened. This obviously sounded suspicious to me, so I took a look at the new images on Google Earth. What I found was what I consider to be obvious evidence of extreme compression processes being applied to the ocean bottom imagery data. Processes that obliterate the color gradients found in the original data. Now, with raw imagery data, each pixel has its own color. But raw data images have really large file sizes, and Google Earth must deal with compressed images in order to reduce these file sizes. Now, normally this causes few problems, but if the compression is extreme in certain locations, then you don't see any details since many adjoining pixels are given the same exact color value. How do you tell that this is happening? The telltale sign is if there are large patches of an image that have straight edges that follow pixel lines, and within the patches all the pixels have the same color. With all pixels having the same color, there are no visible details within the patches since the color gradients have been removed. Now, here is a picture of the new Google Earth image of the anomaly found west of Morocco. Note that the anomaly is barely visible. Now let's show you what happened to the image as we focus on some particular patches of the picture. First, let's take the color completely out of the image and also increase the image's contrast. That allows us to see the color gradients in terms of shades of gray. Note that the color gradients are nearly all gone, as can be seen by the fact that there are only a few shades of gray. Also, there are large patches that follow the pixel lines in which the interior of the patches have only one shade of gray and show no detail at all. In those patches, the color gradients have been completely destroyed. Now let's do the exact same thing to the original image. Take out the color and increase the contrast by the exact same amount. Notice that the color gradients have much greater variety, as evidenced by the existence of many shades of gray. Also notice that there are far fewer patches with only one shade of gray, and those that exist are much smaller than those in the newer image. This is exactly what is destroyed by the application of extreme compression processes to images. In my view, nothing has been fixed with the new Google Earth imagery. As I see it, the anomaly has only been partially erased through extreme image compression. The anomaly is still there, even with the new version. It is just no longer so glaringly easy to see. Remember that these data are governmental data, and governments keep secrets. Let me be clear that I am not claiming that any particular academic, scholar, scientist, or anyone else was influenced by the government to corrupt the Google Earth data. I am not saying that. Indeed, since the government owns the data, the government can do whatever it wants with the data before those outside of the government get their hands on it, including academics. All I am saying is that I personally do not blindly trust any image or any official or authoritative explanation of an image, especially with respect to sensitive topics. Using remote viewing, I can collect my own data and see what is real and what is not real. If you follow along with me, you can too. If the Google Earth images are the result of ship tracks, we can confirm that with remote viewing. If they are not the result of ship tracks, we can find out what they really represent. So we have what appears to be a conflict. We have an original image and a story that explains away that image. Then we have a newer image and a completely new story that explains away that image. If the first story was not plausible, at least to me, why should I accept the second story at face value? How long will it take before the second story is discarded as summarily as was the first? In short, in an age of digital manipulation of imagery, there is virtually no way to believe any image, be it of an image of a UFO, an anomaly on the surface of Mars, or what appears to be ruins on the bottom of the ocean. Pictures are no longer trustworthy. We need another way to find out the truth. There were 7 targets for this project. Targets are the places and events that remote viewers are supposed to perceive when remote viewing. The targets were designed by myself to evaluate their current state, as well as how the targets looked before they ended up on the bottom of the ocean. Also, I wanted to know about the event that may have caused them to end up on the ocean floor. There are 2 places that are examined in this study, both of which suggest significant amounts of what we might call artificiality, or, more bluntly, civilization evidence. The first place is the anomaly just discussed off the coast of Morocco and Spain, but the second is a series of what appear to be regularly spaced holes in the ocean bottom off the coast of Antarctica. Here is the Google Earth image of this anomaly. Notice the rectangular patterning of the markings in the image. Notice they are not clearly whale droppings or anything natural in the Mother Nature sense of the word. The question is, what are they? When the new version of Google Earth came out, the striking visual appearance of the anomalies were diminished, but not eliminated entirely. Thus, both anomalies persist even in the new version of Google Earth. Again, it is not a good idea, in my opinion, to put blind faith in any image these days. Even teenage photoshoppers can create images that are strikingly realistic. We need another way to discern the truth, another way that can be replicated by others, albeit with significant efforts in terms of experimental design and remote viewing training. For both target locations, there are 3 target taskings run in parallel. For each target, both words and an image are used to define what the remote viewer should perceive. The image is the same for all related targets. The first target tasking is the target is shown in the image, and the target time is the 7th of August 2011. The viewer should explore the terrain at the bottom of the ocean as shown in the image in order to determine the meaning, cause, or significance of the patterns shown in the image. The second target tasking is the viewer should explore and describe what the target below looked like before it was located at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. The target time should be when whatever caused the patterns shown in the image was at its peak or optimal state. Finally, the third target tasking is that the viewer should explore and describe the event or process that resulted in the target to be located at the bottom of the ocean as shown in the image. And the target time should be the time that best reveals the cause and nature of the event or process. Thus, what we hope to have with this design is a series of remote viewing sessions that describe the cause of the patterns on the ocean bottom as shown in the 2 target images, as well as what the target locations looked like when they were in their prime, and finally the events that destroyed them by sending them to the ocean bottom. Since there are 2 target images and 3 target taskings, there are a total of 6 targets for this project. However, a 7th and final target tasking was added to the mix at the very end of the remote viewing portion of this study, which reveals what I think will likely be a great surprise to everyone. So if you don't mind, I will hold off telling you about that until later in this presentation so as to put it into proper context. Let's now dive into the results of this study. What did the remote viewers find on the bottom of the ocean in those 2 locations? Let's begin with the results of Dick Allgaier for the first target, which is a bit over 3 miles or 5 kilometers down on the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Morocco and Spain. Again, for this target, the viewer is supposed to describe what is now at the bottom of the ocean. As would be expected, the viewer did describe a harsh and natural landscape with what appears to be flat land, with what he initially thinks is a crater in the center, surrounded by distant mountains. In the same area, he describes deep lines or furrows in the otherwise flat surface. There are also structures along these furrows that are spaced out at even intervals. He describes these things as similar to underground catacombs with what appear to be lots of human skulls and other fossils. The viewer then clearly describes a vast underground city with connecting tunnels. The buildings are absolutely huge, bigger than our largest buildings of today. One underground facility describes as the size of 10 superdomes, where presumably he is referring to the Superdome in New Orleans, Louisiana. Interestingly, the viewer also perceives significant sources of electrical energy at the target, suggesting that whatever is the root cause of those patterns on the ocean bottom may still be producing some form of electrical power and possibly some heat. The viewer also notes that this is an ancient place, eroded by time. Remember that this target also specifies that the viewer is to describe the meaning, cause, or significance of the patterns that are on the ocean bottom. This is important because the viewer appears to have gone back in time to perceive the reason why the target is now at the bottom of the ocean. He perceives a large amount of energy, people working on a project that involves technical expertise and analysis, a project that involved drilling deeply into the earth, a large and catastrophic explosion, and the collapse of land with structures into the sea. Now let's move to the results obtained by Deborah Duggan Takagi for this first target. The viewer clearly describes what she perceives as a settlement located on a flat plain and surrounded by mountains. She also notes that there is an underground element to the target, possibly related to mining. Repeating the same perception reported by Dick Allgaier for this target, Deborah clearly perceives that this target involved civilization elements with advanced technology. Finally, the viewer clearly perceives that the target is submerged in water, while repeatedly describing the target as a collection of structures located on a flat plain surrounded by mountains. Now let's move on to the second target for this series. Here, the viewers are to perceive what the target looked like before it was located at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. The target time would be when whatever caused the patterns shown in the image was at its peak or optimal state. Again, starting with the results obtained by Dick Allgaier, the viewer describes what appears to be a very large and highly advanced industrial city. There are lots of people and they are engaged in work activity that would be typical for a large city. He perceives large buildings that remind him of some of the structures in New York City, such as the Empire State Building and Penn Station. Look closely at some of these sketches of the city. Moving to the results obtained for this second target by Deborah Duggan Takagi, this viewer unambiguously describes this target immediately prior to the moment of its destruction. In her own words, this is an area where an ancient people lived until the area was inundated suddenly by water from a neighboring area that experienced a massive landslide that triggered a tsunami. The viewer also describes an underground cave system, as well as attempts by the populace to flee from the tsunami inundation as the land sinks. In an effort to save themselves, many people were running towards boats. From a sociological perspective, it is also interesting to note that this viewer perceived that these people who lived at this target seemed to have advanced intuitive or even telepathic abilities. Take a close look at these results. With the third target in this series, the viewers are to explore and describe the event or process that resulted in the target to be located at the bottom of the ocean. The target time should be the time that best reveals the cause and nature of the event or process. That is, we now want the viewers to perceive as explicitly as possible whatever happened to the place, such that it ended up the way it did. Starting again with the results obtained by Dick Allgaier, his data suggests that the event or process that resulted in the target to be located at the bottom of the ocean involved human activity within a technologically advanced work environment. Moreover, the masses were aware of the event or process, and there was some attempt to explain what was going on to the people. There is some evidence of grief and crying. The viewer correctly describes this populace as an ancient people in a historic setting. In terms of the general environment, he finds many large structures, but not skyscrapers. The place reminds him of Washington, D.C., Paris, or the Vatican. There are crowds, noises, city sounds, and even pollution of the type you would expect in a city, including tobacco smells. There are multitudes of skeptical people gathered around to hear someone speak. Here is what some of these places looked like. We will see later that these people were apparently gathered to hear descriptions of what was taking place. The ultimate delivery of bad news. Moving to the session for this target done by Deborah Duggan Takagi, the viewer describes a civilization that is inundated and destroyed by seawater as the land sinks. The residents had sufficient time to organize some escape attempts. Some pregnant and fecund women were saved in boats. Men were present in fewer numbers, primarily to sail the boats. This suggests that the disaster was not a complete surprise, as time was needed to make the preparations and to choose who to save. The fact that women capable of childbearing were prioritized indicates that the leaders of the civilization were aware that the disaster was potentially an extinction-level event. The viewer also finds a large red crystalline energy source in a rocky container that was filling with water, suggesting that the people of this time used some form of energy that came from crystals. They depended heavily on their energy source, and it is no longer available to them since it sinks to the bottom of the ocean, while the survivors are in boats on the surface. Some of Deborah's sketches powerfully tell the story of what happened during that fateful time.
Bottom of the ocean. Great depth. Okay? Water. Water. Incredible pressure. This is so weird. It's making my pen isn't writing on the board right. Okay, this is tremendous pressure. And there's these vents where it's stuff oozes up, and there's weird little creatures that live here because it's hot. There's hot things. This is like sulfurous, hot, sulfurous. Great pressure, uneven, appears natural, but underneath, down here, this incredible huge structure. This would be bedrock. Well, down here is bedrock. This has been not carved out, but just like bored out using some kind of like fission fusion. The rock was just fused. So here's this big place. So this is sediment. Up here is rocky sediment, but this right here is bedrock. This is bedrock, and here's the structure right here. This big structure that's huge, like a city down here with looks like the sky. If you look up, it looks like the sky, and it'll change. You can see the sky, you see clouds. The sun will go down, you can see the moon, you can see the sky, you can see the stars at night. But they're not there. It's not projected. It's I don't want to say hologram. It looks three-dimensional when you look up at it, but it's this surface right here. When you look up at it, it has depth and it can change naturally and subtly. You'll see clouds going by. There's no clouds there. This is all under rock, under sediment, under ocean, under great pressure. That is a weird place. This is not, like what kind of technology could build? They didn't just like take a submarine and down and do this. This is interesting place. So there you have it. Where did Courtney Brown send us? I don't know where it is, but I think I know some things about it.
Now, let's move down to the ocean bottom off the coast of Antarctica to examine the second target location, the so-called Antarctic Grid. We begin with Dick Allgire's sessions for this target. For this target, the viewer is to describe the terrain as it is now at the bottom of the ocean in order to determine the meaning, cause, or significance of the patterns shown in the target image. For this target, the viewer was aware that he was slipping in time for this target, which is actually a very common remote viewing experience. He knew and clearly stated that he was looking at something at one time and then connecting it to human activity in another time. The viewer clearly perceives a target involved in a cold and remote area with glaciers, rugged terrain, and deep furrows in the ground, all of which correspond nicely with the target image. However, the viewer also perceives that the target involved human activity of a highly technological sort, which resulted in a catastrophic release of energy. He finds a huge piece of land that broke off and fell away, producing a steep cliff with glaciers on one side. Human activity resulted in an enormous blast of energy that cracked the ground with traumatic, powerful force. Slipping in time to the human activity that created the blast, the viewer perceives highly trained people sitting at complex computer consoles with multiple monitors. The environment seems more scientific than military, but the activity seems associated with controlling a power plant of some sort, perhaps nuclear. The controls are partially of the dial and button variety, but the operator also is linked up with the controls using some sort of neural interface that is placed on his head. There are also sensors for his hands and fingers that are used to control the machinery. Some of the images in this session are absolutely startling. Deborah Duggan Takagi similarly describes this target as a canyon with deep fissures and holes. She also describes the location as experiencing extreme weather conditions. Apparently, there is buried objects at the target site. The viewer describes a prehistoric site with drill holes that are a result of mining operations. The area is described as being inundated with water after a sudden flooding. Slipping in time, the viewer perceives that there was once a great deal of foliage at the target site, but that the entire area was submerged underwater during a flash flooding inundation. What did this target location look like when it was in its optimal state before it sank to the bottom of the ocean? This is the focus of the next target for this project, and according to Dick Allgire's session for this target, it was a technologically advanced city or large facility that had many structures and people. His data suggests that people of authority may have been present, and that there was an unfolding of an event or process that was both unexpected and catastrophic. This event involved human activity that went out of control, resulting in a crisis of severe proportions. The viewer even perceived some leader, like a president or other important official, being led to a secure area, like a bunker, during what was perceived as a state of urgency. The leader was civilian, but he and some of his advisors were led to this bunker by military people in uniform. There was a rush to all of this, since events were transpiring quickly, and the viewer states that the setting reminded him of World War II, when intelligence people would get information, assemble it, and then have the runners take the reports to distribute the information to other locations in a command center. This was a heavily developed facility where some of the structures were above the ground while other structures were extending at least 10 stories below the ground. This is a modern facility near a waterfront with lots of cement and asphalt. There were loud voices issuing commands or information over loudspeakers. The viewer even reports the sense of a continuity government, or a government that would continue in the event of a major disaster. There was a huge survival command bunker here, but at this crucial moment before the end, some of the people could clearly see what was about to happen, and they could not believe their eyes. Some prayed for the first time. They were uncertain as to what to do. There was disbelief. Even though they knew this was possible, they could see what was happening with the computer readouts. Nothing could really prepare them for what they saw happening. There was a complete loss of control. The people had a combined sense of awe and disbelief. It was almost as if they did not know whether to laugh or cry. Some of the sketches in this session are, well, bone-chilling. Deborah Duggan-Takagi's session for this target emphasizes the idea that this location off the coast of Antarctica was a technologically advanced mining operation. There was a disaster at this location and lives were lost. She clearly draws some of the mining equipment as well as some of the terrain. Now we want to explore the event or process that resulted in the target to be located at the bottom of the ocean off the coast of Antarctica, which is the next target. In Dick Allgire's sessions for this target, he describes an event or process that involved a deep shaft drilled into the earth and a huge explosion that was associated with what appears to be volcanic activity. An entire civilization was destroyed in the aftermath. The authorities attempted to maintain control of the panicking and rioting masses, but apparently all was lost. The people were screaming and out of control, and the society simply fell apart. A huge yellow plume of energy arose from the ocean, like the sun underwater, easily visible from space. A tsunami of immense proportions occurred. The land was inundated. From the viewer's drawing, the explosion of energy ripping through the planet's crust seems to have been nearly the size of Australia. Deborah Duggan-Takagi's session for this target corroborates much of this. From her data, she perceives that the target site experienced a cataclysmic earthquake involving tremendous noise and visible energy. The land and surrounding mountains collapsed, destroying or sealing an extensive underground tunnel system. There were massive landslides, blackened skies, and highly visible aerial bursts of light. She describes the explosion in much the same way as Dick Allgaier, even in terms of the color of the energy. For the seventh and final target in this project, the goal was to locate and describe the point of origin that triggered and thus initiated the event or process that resulted in the target to be located at the bottom of the ocean off the coast of Antarctica. Here we want to identify as clearly as possible what actually triggered the event. From Dick Allgaier's session for this target, the point of origin that triggered and thus initiated the event or process that resulted in the target to be located at the bottom of the ocean was an explosion of nearly unimaginable proportions, including a mushroom cloud in a highly populated area near the sea. This resulted in the landmass sinking and the water surging to cover the land. A great deal of technologically advanced infrastructure was submerged, and apparently there was no way to save the populace, and nearly all were lost. Also, the populace was notified of the events as they were unfolding, and there was a dumbfounded acceptance of the inescapable consequences of the situation. Underground bunkers were useless in such a situation. Everything was destroyed. This was science gone bad at its worst. In terms of Deborah Duggan Takagi's session for this target, the point of origin for this nearly unimaginable disaster was a massive fissure in the earth. The viewer also perceives unusual solar activity as well as some flying objects. Now, some of these flying objects could have been rocks that were thrown up into the air by the explosion, but the idea of an enormous fissure in the Earth's crust, which leads to extensive volcanic activity, dominates these data. The depth and width of the fissure in the crust are too great to adequately describe in normal words. The viewer again perceives a mining operation at the target site. This is science associated with drilling deeply into the earth. Science that took a horrific turn for the worse. Let us now take a step back and reflect. If these remote viewing results are correct, is there any other evidence that humanity once suffered a horrific catastrophe, possibly of a volcanic nature, that killed off nearly everyone on the planet? Surely, if such a huge explosion occurred in the ancient past, there would be some biological and possibly geological evidence of it. Interestingly, there may be such an incident, and it may be that contemporary scientists do not fully understand the origin of the event. According to many mainstream scientists, approximately 70,000 years ago, a tremendous volcanic event ripped open this planet and killed everyone except for a few thousand breeding survivors. That is, there may have been more survivors, but approximately only a few thousand were capable of breeding. Thus, everyone alive today is related to these same, say, 2,000 pairs of survivors from 70,000 years ago. This conclusion is obtained from genetic information for the current human population on our planet, something that has been called a genetic bottleneck in our history. Well, the actual volcanic incident is currently referenced as the Toba catastrophe theory, or the Toba event. The word Toba refers to Lake Toba in Indonesia. According to the theory, a volcanic explosion was followed by an abrupt change in the global climate and a dramatic culling of the human population. We don't need to agree as to whether or not Toba was the exact location of the explosion described in this remote viewing report, but what is interesting to note is that mainstream scientists are looking for a global event that contains contained both explosive and volcanic components that could explain a sudden and dramatic decline in the human population on this planet in the not-too-distant past. Obviously, many questions remain. If these data are correct, and if one or more governments really do know about the anomalies on the bottom of the ocean as representing evidence of past and technologically advanced human civilization on Earth, why would a government want to keep this secret? And why hasn't everyone learned about this previously in school and in the media? The answer to this should be pretty obvious after giving it some thought. We live in a world in which there is a tremendous amount of suppressed information. Some of the so-called powers that be may know about this ancient civilization, but they would have an interest in keeping this information out of the public realm. Why? Because if there is one thing the powers that be do not want, it is for the people to rise up and tell them that they can't do something that they, the powers that be, otherwise would want to do. You can see this in everything from the development of genetically modified food to the construction of unsafe nuclear power facilities. Right or wrong, authorities everywhere don't like it when others interfere with their activities. Long ago, science gone bad ripped this planet apart in the past, and secrecy-cloaked science could do it again. That is why the powers that be don't want this to be taught in our schools. It would be a lesson in not trusting the authorities, and the authorities fear that they could lose their ability to control their own agenda. This is a good reason why everyone on this planet may really want to know about these anomalies on the ocean floor. We need to know about our past in order to deal intelligently with our future. If you are impressed with the technological development of our civilization today, think again. We have done all this before, and more, and it ended very badly. It was not some alien civilization that destroyed its civilization on a distant planet long ago. It was us, here, on Earth. We need to learn about our past so that we can avoid our previous mistakes. Science and technological development are good, and we need both. But we were foolish in the past to ignore the risks associated with what we can do with our new tools and understanding, and we would be doubly foolish to keep our eyes closed again as we march forward in search of technological solutions to our current problems. Both scientists and governments are normally loath to outside oversight of their activities. It usually involves red tape, bureaucratic excess, and prying eyes. But when the fate of our entire world is at stake, can we really do without considering all the possibilities? This is one of the primary reasons why we need remote viewing to be accepted by mainstream science. Remote viewing is a tool by which we can look to see what others have done, both previously and elsewhere, in terms of their accomplishments and their disasters. What better way to know of the future's possibilities than to witness them firsthand? As for myself, I am neutral about the activities or interests of the powers that be. These games, played over and over again, eventually become tiring. Rather, my interest is in the discovery process itself. It is exciting to find out about an ancient and technologically advanced human civilization right here on Earth. I really look forward to the day in which we can take a submarine down to explore these ruins in a truly uncompromised and fully public exploration. But for now, the remote viewing sessions can tell us much about the essential story of what happened long ago. We humans have a complicated history on this planet. Indeed, this report may reflect only the tip of the iceberg in this regard. Stay tuned. More explorations using remote viewing with a large variety of topics are on the way. I am Courtney Brown, Director of the Farsight Institute.